Okay, we're going to get started. Thanks for joining us in our webinar about rethinking your media. I'm Jeff Montgomery, partner and strategist at Exclamation Media, which is the in-house media department for the Ampersand Agency, a branding firm based here in Austin, Texas. Joining me today is Emily Branson, a media manager at Exclamation, and I might add a rock star media manager. Together we'll be sharing the presentation duties. I have a few housekeeping chores, so let me run through them. Our webinar will go about 45 minutes, and we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. We're using the Zoom webinar feature, so at any time you have a question, we encourage you to use the Q&A tab at the very top of your screen and send us a question. Here and there during the course of the presentation, if we get some questions, we'll try and answer them. Otherwise, we'll do them at the end. Just so you know, we've set up our time on Zoom to run about an hour and 30 minutes, just so we don't end the program abruptly at 1 o'clock, but we're fairly confident we'll finish this by 1. Emily, is there anything that I missed in the setup?
I don't think so.
Then let's begin. Here's the agenda. I'm sorry. Let's begin. As most of you know all too well, and I'm assuming that many of you listening today work in media or are familiar with media, media has changed quite a bit over the last 5 years. When COVID hit earlier this year, we did what many media companies did. We decided to take a step back and think about how we might recommend adjustments to media for all of our clients during the COVID period, even though at that time we didn't know how long COVID might last, and we still don't. As we did that, we realized very quickly that the changes that had taken place over the past few years and across different platforms were no longer just small tactical changes confined to performance on each of those platforms. It was much bigger than that. A fundamental shift had taken place, creating the need to update and alter our definition and guidelines for media's best practices. Every platform, to some extent, had altered their approach, and yet everywhere we looked, it was business as usual. And nothing about the way media was being managed had kept up with those changes. That's why we put this webinar together, to highlight the 5 major ways that media has changed and how those changes require you to change the way you set up, monitor, and run your media. Here's the agenda that we'll walk you through. I'm going to set the stage for why we started to rethink our approach to media. I'll also talk about targeting, KPIs, or key performance indicators. I'll hand off to Emily, and she's going to talk about setting it and forgetting it, which is really about testing and optimization, the ads you run, and organic social. And then she'll hand it back to me, and I'll close by offering our point of view for a new strategic media framework, one that offers a conceptual way to think about how media best practices need to evolve. Let's take a look at how the media landscape has changed. COVID-19, as we all know, has challenged the way we do business. And while businesses are reopening and offering their service and products in a variety of different ways, and as many of you know, it's amazing what a number of businesses have done, it's clear consumers may not be going back to all of their same old retail patterns that existed before COVID. And for that reason, we think businesses need to keep an eye on how their consumers' habits are changing. They need to understand them and then think about how it changes the way they connect with their consumers in the short run as well as the long run, because these changes by consumers will continue to evolve. This also raises questions about who you should target during COVID, existing customers or potentially new customers. For most businesses pre-COVID, targeting and attracting new customers was their primary goal. Once COVID hit, most consumers pulled back and shifted their spending habits, which caused a large number of businesses to pay more attention to them. We think that was smart and have advised almost all of our clients to do just that. Keeping your current customers in the marketing and advertising funnel, especially when it comes to messaging about how your business has adjusted to COVID, has been critical and means you are less likely, if done properly, to see significant erosion, customer erosion. In fact, a number of the business we work with have seen an increase in their current customer spending habits with them, and they have also seen a growth in new customers as a result of some of the targeting techniques we'll discuss in this webinar. Yet, for far too many businesses, their media was underperforming even before COVID. COVID simply exposed those weaknesses, and in taking a closer look at those weaknesses, we realized that a larger problem was at the root of most media campaigns' underperformance. Media's best practices simply have not kept up with all of the changes that have taken place. Everything in media has changed, from the new and different kinds of ways you can set up campaigns, to the number of different kinds of ads you can now run, to the large number of new metrics that you can use to monitor your campaigns. So what started as a deep dive for us into how to adjust to patterns emerging during COVID led to a much larger topic: how to think differently about how we approach media, with one primary goal in mind: improve our media campaigns' performance and move our clients' bottom line numbers. So I'm going to pause here for a second. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send them to them. Emily, do you have anything to add before we jump in?
Yeah, I think just to really hammer home what you're saying, I think in the first few months of COVID and what we were seeing online, it was actually pretty surprising to see how resistant businesses were to shifting resources to focus on their own core customers. So it's definitely been interesting to see how these different businesses have changed and adapted to these new times over the past few months, and really shift their strategy across the board.
I think you're absolutely right. We met quite a bit resistance with about half our clients, and the other half worked with us and have made appropriate adjustments. And over the next 6 to 12 months, that will continue. Well, let's continue. Nowhere has more change taken place than how you can target online. So right now we're going to take a look at rethinking your targeting. Think about what comes to mind when you think about defining a target audience. Probably age, gender, and geographic location, which when you think about it, were how rating services like Arbitron and Nielsen defined audiences on TV and radio 50 years ago. And yet that is exactly how most people still set up their digital and social media audiences. We've created a visual for this standard kind of demographic and geographic approach. We call it the broad and wide. The broad and wide approach, where usually only demographic and geographic parameters are used in targeting. For example, what you can see on this screen, if you're wanting to target 18 to 49-year-old adults in the greater Austin area, that might be 1 million people. Yet only 25,000 to 50,000 at most might be interested in your client's product or service, which is why when you see so few red dots on the screen, they're your potential customers, just 2.5% to 5% of your reach or total gross impressions. So the question we asked was, can you add any additional layer of online behavior that improves your targeting? The answer is yes. And the key is to work with the platform's algorithm, which is designed to connect people with similar interests and online habits. By adding that additional layer of online behavior to your targeting criteria, such as friends, interests, similar online patterns, pages people follow, pages they interact with, as well as people they have interacted with on posts through likes, comments, and shares, along with any other proprietary lists, which you can see on this screen how it breaks out, that you can add to your targeting program, such as loyalty club members, device ID targeting, third-party lists based on online interest and habits. All of this enhances your targeting capabilities. Now you're targeting people who are much more likely to be potential customers based on their online behavior, along with demographic and geographic parameters, which makes them a high quality impression, not just a gross impression. Let me define impressions for a second. Impressions are the number of times your content or ads were displayed to your target audience. High quality impressions is a new term that we've created to identify how targeting must transition from the broad and wide approach, which you remember we showed you on a slide, a couple slides back, to incorporate a platform's innate ability to deliver a much richer pool of target audience members. Using a platform's algorithm to more precisely target like-minded people with similar online habits and interests improves performance and helps you increase engagement in a much more cost-efficient way. In this next image, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. The broad and wide approach is on the left, as well as above and below the much more precise and efficient high-quality impression approach. Often both approaches are necessary. You need to start wide and then narrow your targeting to high-quality impressions. That band of yellow-orange on the right above high-quality impressions with the red dots represents the same 25 to 50,000 potential customers I referenced earlier in the example with 1 million in your reach target audience. This is critical in improving performance. And I might add, later in the webinar, Emily's going to show you an example of how someone didn't approach it this way and how inefficient their approach was. This approach also allows you to reduce your reach, which is the number of people you're targeting. So in the case that we've given, 1 million for the adults 18 to 49 in Austin, and increases your frequency, which is the number of times an ad will be seen by the folks in your target audience. We'll discuss a bit more about that in the next section on KPIs. Most platforms have also provided additional tools that help you align your business and media goals with how you set up and run your campaigns. And I might add, we're using a number of the screenshots from how Facebook actually operates because it's probably the most sophisticated and complicated platform to work on. But almost all the other platforms have the same kinds of tools. They're just a little bit easier to work with. The problem, however, is that you need to know and understand exactly how each algorithm on whichever platform you're on executes whichever campaign goal or objective you've selected. Here on Facebook, there are 11 from the left-hand side on awareness campaigns to the right-hand side on conversions, and then engagement in the middle. But the reason why it's important to make sure you know and understand how the algorithm works with these choices is because not all of the campaign objectives are equal, and not all of the potential outcomes are clear. Some objectives, and that's what they're called on Facebook, some of the campaign objectives have algorithms that intentionally minimize or reduce engagement and clicks. For example, Facebook's reach objective will do just that. It will reduce the people in your reach that engage with ads and click on ads. Consequently, you will see a much lower engagement and click-through rate. And again, in the example Emily shows you later in the presentation, I think you'll be shocked by how much it can affect the campaign if you choose the wrong campaign objective or goal to start your campaign. The other important factor to remember, as we all know and have experienced, and it is very frustrating, platforms change their algorithms all of the time. And they rarely explain those changes in very much detail, if any at all. That's why it's important to test each platform you run on at least twice a year, if not quarterly, to make sure you detect any changes on how the platform is operating. A small test that runs 2 or 3 weeks can save you from finding out too late about a change that has been made that alters how an algorithm works, which could affect your campaign performance. Again, this is a good place to stop as we finish up this section and see if there are any questions that anyone has, and you time to send some questions if you'd like to. Emily, anything else in what we've discussed you want to add?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that as we're looking at this slide, this is one example from one platform, and this alone is overwhelming. So thinking about all of the different platforms that we have in our toolbox to use and run on, and really getting to know each of those platforms and how they work, because it is all different, like you said. So while this is one example, there are so many other different intricate platforms and algorithms that we need to continually learn and keep up with.
And I might add, we test all platforms continuously to make sure we're understanding how the algorithm is working and or changing. Okay, so let's turn to rethinking our KPIs. KPIs, or key performance indicators, are the secret weapon to making sure your media performs well. Two of the most misunderstood KPIs in all of media are reach and frequency. So let me define them. Reach is the potential number of people in your target audience. So again, if we use the same targeting mentioned earlier, 18 to 49-year-olds in the greater Austin area, then that reach might be 1 million. Frequency is the number of times an ad is seen by your target audience. Most people talk about and identify reach as a campaign objective or goal. We showed it to you on the previous slides, but almost no one talks about frequency. That's a mistake, because if you have a campaign with considerable reach, but very low frequency, then your campaign is likely to underperform. Reach and frequency both need to achieve certain thresholds before a campaign can perform well. The more people see an ad, the more likely they will engage and consider purchasing your product or service. That's why we recommend that you set up your reach and frequency goals up front at the beginning of a campaign and be transparent about them. Here are some important guidelines on how to do just that. The rule of thumb is that for an ad to penetrate, people need to see it at least 7 to 10 times, minimum. But most businesses don't want an ad to just penetrate. They want ads to be seen enough times to move their bottom line numbers. That's why most media experts recommend exposing people to an ad at least 10 to 15 times over a 60 to 90-day period. What happens if you don't reach those frequency levels? Well, let me say, over the years, we have audited a substantial number of media campaigns and have seen firsthand, especially over the last 5 years, what happens when frequency is not paid attention to, and instead the campaign focuses exclusively on reach. Low frequency almost always leads to underperformance. In fact, most of the businesses we've audited were not even aware of how low their frequency levels were. Most had a frequency of less than 5, which obviously meant that most of the people they had been targeting had not seen their ads enough times to move their numbers. So how do you fix that problem? The goal must be to make sure your reach doesn't exceed your frequency. Your budget will drive your decision making, it always does, but that decision making must make sure to align and balance reach and frequency. If your campaign is not set up to hit a frequency level between 10 and 15, then you'll have to lower your reach to get the ad frequency you need. Let's take a look at an example of what that means. Imagine the two different media campaign approaches on this slide. In campaign 1, the media plan's reach is 1 million unique individuals and the frequency is 5. In campaign 2, the media's planned reach is 750,000, but the frequency is 10 to 15. Everything else is the same. The budget, the creative, the timeline, all the same. The only difference is how the media goal was set up and implemented. So the question you may ask is, which campaign is more effective? I can guarantee you that Plan 2, Campaign 2, will perform better on both media KPIs and perhaps more importantly, the client's bottom line numbers. Again, Emily's going to show you an example, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, but it is pretty amazing of how it can or cannot work. One way to make sure your campaign does not underperform is to set up realistic goals for each and every platform at the beginning of the campaign. The starting point should be a client's previous campaign's results, and if those are below the industry average, then start with the industry average. By setting realistic goals at the beginning of a campaign, you create a framework that gives you the way, guides the way you test and optimize performance. That also guarantees that you will monitor and do all that you can to beat the goal that has been established. Because the number of metrics that are now available to help you do just that are endless, as you can see on this slide. I've emphasized reach and frequency because they are two of the most important media metrics, but they are not the only metrics. On this slide alone, there are over 60. And while we don't recommend paying attention to all these metrics for every campaign you run, we do believe that there are 4 metrics that are the bedrock of almost every campaign: reach, frequency, click-through rate, and engagement. These 4 metrics are like the guardrails on a data delivery highway. They're guiding your targeting, your optimization, and testing. Depending on your client, their goals, the business or product promoted, the different ads created, and the platforms you're running on, we usually recommend a second set of metrics to pay attention to and to use throughout the optimization process, refine and improve performance even more. I know there's a lot of interest and curiosity about which metrics are best to use to track performance, but answering that is always dependent on a lot more information. So if you have any questions about metrics, I suggest you include your contact information, and we'll be more than happy to follow up with you and get all the information we need to advise you properly. Let's now turn to another way media has changed. I'm going to turn the mic over to Emily, but before I do that, I want to check and see, are there any questions that we've received that we might want to take a look to?
Yeah, we got a question. I think it'd be great for you to answer this, Jeff. Someone asked, when you say 10 to 15 exposures, is that for just one ad or one platform?
No, that's the frequency level is for the entire campaign, and most campaigns tend to run for 2, 3, maybe 4 months. And so you want a frequency level, whether there's 1 or 2 ads or several ads, it would be a combination of them on all the platforms, along with any traditional media have, to work out what the reach and frequency levels might be. So it wouldn't be just one ad on Facebook has to reach 15 exposures, and one ad on Snapchat and one ad on Instagram, et cetera. It would be a combination of those platforms working out so they add up to 10 or 15 exposures.
Perfect.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily, and she's going to take it and run from here.
Thank you, Jeff. So as we all know, social and digital platforms today make it all too easy to simply set up a campaign and let it run. Well, research shows that if you're not testing and optimizing, then your digital and social campaigns will actually underperform by at least 30%. Think about that for a minute. If you're spending $100,000 on a media campaign and you're not testing or optimizing, then there's a very good chance you just wasted $30,000. On a larger scale, if your media budget were $1 million and you're not testing or optimizing, then you could be wasting up to $300,000. This might sound crazy, but it's not. Underperformance should not be minimized, and it should not be accepted internally with the media team. So how can you combat this underperformance? Here's something you probably haven't heard before. Facebook's platform doesn't actually allow you to optimize.
What?
That's right. You cannot optimize on Facebook or Instagram once a campaign is set up and running. The only two choices you have are to let it run or turn it off. Nothing more, because you can't optimize.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's why you need to test an alternative campaign setup to determine the most effective goal or objective. Then you have the option of turning off the campaign or campaigns that are underperforming, and you can shift more funds to the better performing campaign, which almost always improves overall campaign performance. Testing helps you understand a digital or social media platform's algorithm, how a campaign gets set up, how ads are rotated or selected to run, the time of day, day of the week, frequency levels, spend levels, in a way that cannot be underestimated. And like we said earlier, different platforms have very different algorithms. So Snapchat is different than Facebook, which is very different from programmatic. So testing the algorithms allows you to determine how to improve that platform's performance. In addition to testing the algorithm, it's also important to test creative, whether that's A/B testing or ABC testing, to determine which ads are the most effective. On this slide, we have some examples from a social campaign that our parent company, Ampersand, did for Stripes and Laredo Taco Company. As you can see, they all have the same sort of summer of '69, very cool feel, but the creative varies from piece to piece, which leaves room for testing to see which piece or pieces of creative perform the best. However, most businesses don't usually test creative, and they don't always pay attention to when ads should be rotated or refreshed in order to maintain or improve performance. Instead, they run too few ads for too long a period, guaranteeing that their campaigns will underperform. Keep in mind, ad performance has its ups and downs. It's not just a single static line. So the moment you all have been waiting for, our groundbreaking real-life example of what happens when you set it and forget it versus what happens when you test and optimize. So this slide is a real-life example of Facebook performance. It shows you how a company spent its media money and the results that they achieved. The Fortune 500 company in this example is a real company that we audited, and the numbers under their column are taken from an actual monthly report. Our numbers are from a different client in a similar industry, and the numbers are what we achieved with the same exact budget on Facebook. Our point here is to demonstrate how poorly some media campaigns perform, and the company wasn't even aware of it. We actually achieved 31,528 more clicks in this example. So let that set in. But how could something like this happen? Well, it's likely that the media team set up the campaign with the goal of reach, like Jeff mentioned in our targeting section, which achieved very low frequency, and they didn't pay attention to what their performance was. They simply set up the campaign and forgot about it. On this next slide, you see the very same thing on Instagram. In this example, same companies, same budget, we achieved almost 4,000 more clicks. Also, something to note is that Instagram's platform generally gets less engagement and fewer clicks than Facebook, which is why the numbers across the board are a bit lower. So when you combine the numbers, you see an even more dramatic result. We would have achieved over 36,000 more clicks on Facebook and Instagram combined for the exact same amount of money. So as we wrap up this section, I want to give you all some time to submit your questions in the Q&A box. But Jeff, do you have anything to add?
I don't, although I will say one thing about the Fortune 500 example. It was really difficult to work with that client and help them understand how poor their performance was and help them understand ways that they could improve it. There was a great deal of resistance to believing that could be done better. So I would say it's something to think about. But we did have one question come in, Emily.
Oh, yeah.
The person asked, so if you can't optimize on Facebook and you're just running different campaigns with different goals all the time?
Yeah. So that is correct. You're not running them all the time, every day of every week, but it is important to start off by testing to see which campaign goal and which campaign setup works for you, whether that's changing the goal, whether that's changing the audience. That's part of the optimization process. But yeah, essentially, since you can't optimize during a campaign on Facebook, you have to find these creative ways to test and optimize and see what works best.
I might add, if you've worked with a client longer, you've done enough testing where you've probably determined the right way to set up a campaign, and it'll perform well. But if you're within your first year, you've got to be testing alternative campaign options.
All right, it looks like we got one more question.
Oh.
How often should you be refreshing creative? I would say it definitely depends on your target audience. We've seen that our younger audience creative goes stale a bit quicker because they're online all the time. And with our older audiences, you can let it run for a bit longer. So we typically recommend for that younger audience anywhere between 3 and 4 weeks, every 3 to 4 weeks refreshing creative. And then for the older audiences, probably about every 4 to 6 weeks. So either way, you're refreshing about every 4 to 6 weeks.
And I would add, if you're monitoring the performance, you'll start to see performance decline. That's also a good indicator of when you might refresh.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially looking week over week, it's pretty clear. All right. So we are going to jump into our next section, which is rethinking your ad suite. Gone are the days when simply running a static image or video ad on digital and social will suffice. There are a plethora of different ad types now, so let's look at how that will affect your media approach. All of the different social and digital platforms are actively developing new ad types and targeting tactics for us to implement. However, they aren't always announced or explained, so it's our job in media to learn more about the platform developments and work them into our media plans when right for the client and their messaging. Most people aren't even aware of the range of new ads that are available to create. Far too many businesses are afraid to introduce new ads for fear that they won't perform well, so they run the same ad types over and over again. However, the key is to test these new ad types in order to see what works best for your client and their message. So looking at all the different ad types on Facebook alone, they all serve a different purpose. So if you're looking to boost e-commerce sales, a collection ad might be the type for you. It allows you to feature different products all in one view. If you're looking to message something a bit more complex, an instant experience ad will allow you to feature a variety of different things and explain them a bit more in depth. These ad types manifest in very different ways, so it's important to dig deeper and learn how they work. In fact, as of late, Facebook has launched the ability to test text within ads. So you can include multiple text variations with a single ad to see which copy performs best. This is just one example of how these platforms are constantly evolving. In addition to all the different ad types on Facebook, there are also a variety of other ad types offered by Google. You can run a text-only ad to appear in search results or feature a product in a product shopping ad. There's no one solution to your media either, so it's important to run a mix of these different ad types in order to see what's working. Even more, Snapchat offers different ad types that engage your audience in a totally different way, whether that's a Snapchat filter or even an AR lens. In fact, just this summer, Snapchat launched their new dynamic product ads, which allows businesses to upload product catalogs to the Snapchat backend. Products are put into a template and then shown to relevant app users. If a product's price or availability changes, the ads will automatically update in real time, meaning less work on the back end. Beyond social, there are also so many different ad types for programmatic ads. Even more, there are different sizes for each programmatic ad type, meaning you might have a static image ad for programmatic, but that will likely require different creative for a 300 by 250 ad versus a 728 by 90 ad, as you can see in this example above. In addition to more traditional programmatic ads, there are also rich media or high impact ads. These add a whole new layer to programmatic advertising. From page grabbers to brand galleries, rich media ads provide a more dynamic and complex approach to programmatic media. In the example on this slide, we have a high impact ad that we ran for a former client of ours. The dynamic ad type allowed us to feature multiple products, as you can see at the bottom. It also allowed our audience to really engage with the ad. They were able to click those little plus signs to learn more about the product, give it a spin to see the back, and learn all about it. It was really, really engaging and yielded incredibly impressive results since we were able to engage our audience in a unique and exciting way. So there's no doubt about it. The amount of digital and social ad types that exist today is overwhelming. So what's the key to keeping up with these changes in the different ad types? Testing. Slowly incorporate new ad types into your media mix on a quarterly basis to see how they work, how they perform, and if they're the right fit for your client. So now that we've come to the end of our Rethinking Your Ad Suite section, I'll give you guys a minute to submit any questions. In the meantime, Jeff, do you have anything you want to add?
Nothing I want to add, but I will say we got another question. What is instant experience? I saw that on your Facebook ad types.
Yeah, I can take that. So instant experience is an incredibly engaging ad type that Facebook offers. It allows you to really it looks like a regular ad, and as you engage with it, it opens up. You can feature carousels, videos. It's very engaging, somewhat similar to the high impact ad, where you can click around, learn more. It's kind of like a microsite in a way, where you're able to learn so much more than a standard static ad that you'd see in the feed.
Yeah, we've employed it with several clients, and I'm always surprised on how much engagement and across all demographic groups we get on that kind of ad. Instant experience used to be called Canvas for those that might remember that.
Great, excellent question. Okay, so we are going to go into our last section, Rethinking Organic Social Media. As most of you probably know, organic social media is not what it used to be, and it should definitely be part of your media mix and used as a strategic tool for messaging. Ever since Facebook changed its algorithm, very few of your followers and fans actually see your organic social content. In fact, only 5 to 15% of your followers and fans actually see your organic content. So in even more terms, that means that 85 to 95% of your followers and fans don't see any of your organic social content. So what's the solution to this algorithmic change? Boosting your content to ensure it's seen by all of your followers and fans. Most businesses and brands spend a significant amount of time and money developing creative for social. What they don't realize is that all that money they've spent for the content to be created is wasted if they're not putting money behind that content to be seen. So the visual on the left is all those awesome followers and fans that you have on your social pages. But if you're not putting money behind it, the amount of people who see your content is that image on the right.
So it looks like actually the attendance at college football games now during COVID.
Yeah. All right. So why not put some of your media spend behind this organic content so it's seen? It's also really important that your organic social is seen by your followers and fans because they're your core customers. While prospecting and gaining new customers is definitely important, it's equally important to maintain that loyal customer base. The easiest way to do this is to continue engaging with them on your social pages. Like Jeff said earlier, with COVID-19, your customer base has become even more important. During these times, people are supporting brands they trust, so that organic social pages are the best way to continue building that brand trust and engaging with your core customer base. Not only is it crucial that your followers and fans are seeing your organic content, but by boosting, you'll actually see stronger results. So the numbers in this slide are from an actual client of ours, same client. For the month of March, we ran paid social ads, and for the month of April, we mainly boosted their organic content. Paid social and boosting were both conducted on Facebook. However, we saw almost double the amount of engagement from boosting compared with paid social. In addition to seeing more engagement, we've also seen that boosting garners more clicks than paid ads typically do. So whether you're looking for engagement or clicks, boosting is a great tool to use and incorporate into your media mix.
And I might add, Emily, a large number of clients are both surprised and a little resistant to spending more money on organic social. But the data that we've been able to show them over time with a few tests here and there has convinced them. And when you look at these numbers on the slide, it's just very dramatic how much more effective boosting can be than the broad and wide demographic approach in paid ads in social.
Definitely. All right, and in that same vein, boosting has come a long way over the past few years. What used to be very limited capabilities, especially compared with what was previously called promoted posts, has now grown to have in-depth targeting, placement, and audience capabilities. Most people don't realize that boosting has evolved to have the capabilities of what most paid ads have nowadays, deeming it even more effective than before. In fact, boosting allows you to incorporate those key audience targeting tools, like Jeff mentioned earlier in this deck. These audience capabilities are the same as paid. So if you have an audience made of your loyalty club members, you can also boost your organic content to that same loyalty club audience. So not only are you getting those high quality impressions with your paid ads, but also for boosting your organic social. Anything you want to add to that as well, Jeff?
No, I will say though, this was the exact same slide that I had presented earlier on targeting. And what people don't realize that you just mentioned is that what you can do in organic and paid is almost identical today. So the fact that a large number of their core customers are following them and a large number of businesses aren't actually spending a little money in organic is a huge mistake. Instead, they shift the money over to paid social on the broad and wide approach, and they're missing all of the people that follow them on organic.
Definitely.
So something to think about.
Great. Well, I'm going to pass it back to Jeff to wrap up with a new strategic media framework for y'all.
Thanks, Emily. I know we've covered quite a bit of information about how media has changed and what you need to do to make sure you get the best possible performance from your campaigns. We've done that because each of these 5 areas, targeting, KPIs, optimizing and testing, your ad suite, and organic social, have changed on almost all platforms. The amount of change that has taken place means you can't think about how you do things in these 5 areas in a silo. They all affect one another. Making a change in one area won't likely improve campaign performance. Making changes in all 5 areas will definitely improve your campaign's performance. So we recommend you think about how they are connected and aligned strategically. In fact, we've created a new visual that has helped us internally here at Exclamation Media. This slide shows you how we organize the 5 areas we have discussed and why we think they create an entirely new strategic framework for media. So let me walk you through the different levels. Level 1 at the bottom is organic social, which Emily just talked about. We believe it is the baseline for where you should both watch and engage with your current clients' customers. They're an extremely valuable group of customers, many of them core customers, that are following your brand and should not be ignored or underutilized. In fact, you can now test creative and a much wider range of audiences on organic social. This allows you to use the platform's algorithm to provide critical data options for how you can identify the high quality impressions that we showed you earlier in the presentation. But remember, that requires you to fund and support organic social in order to do all that we are suggesting. Because what you can do on organic has expanded considerably, but those features require funding. So for us, if I have not made this entirely clear, organic social must now be considered paid.
The amount of times I've heard that in the past year.
And that leads nicely to our second level, rethinking targeting, whose goal is to take advantage of a platform's algorithm, which, as we have mentioned, emphasizes an individual's online habits, interests, and online interconnectedness with others. That's why you can start wide, the demographic and geographic approach, but must then narrow your approach to high quality impressions, which will substantially improve your targeting, generate higher engagement. You could see that in the social section in terms of the clicks and the engagement rate. You can use that same kind of targeting in paid and improve overall cost effectiveness. That's why we always incorporate each platform's targeting capabilities that leverage online information about people who are engaging with your brand, which then works with that platform's algorithm to identify others online who have similar interests. In other words, improving the targeting to find more like-minded potential customers, that 25 to 50,000, more concentrated in the high quality impression slide. That takes us to level 3, new ad types. Today, there are over 65 different kinds of ads, but most businesses usually run on just a handful of standard ad types. It's critical to experiment and test a variety of these new ad types to make sure your brand remains fresh and relevant, because running the same old handful of ads won't continue to keep your current customers engaged and almost certainly won't attract the new customers needed to meet your goals. That's why we routinely test a wide variety of new and different ad units, especially rich media ads. We have found that once someone engages with a rich media ad, they then start to engage with that business's other more standard ads, so don't hesitate to experiment. That takes us to level 4, crucial KPIs. While there are over 60 different kinds of metrics, the two most important for almost every media campaign are reach and frequency. Remember though, reach alone won't get the job done. Reach and frequency must work in tandem so that ad frequency levels always hit 10 to 15 exposures over a 60 to 90 day period. It is critical that your KPI goals be set up and transparent at the beginning of your campaign. Those goals should guide the way you optimize and test, which is absolutely essential because few campaigns go as planned. That's why level 5 may be the most important level for improving your campaign performance. Setting it and forgetting it almost always leads to underperformance. You must be occasionally testing and optimizing against realistic campaign goals to achieve results, as we like to say here at Exclamation, that are above and beyond not just the industry average, but the client's expectations. Remember, as Emily mentioned, some platforms don't allow you to optimize, so you have to test alternate campaign approaches. That kind of testing will allow you to understand better how a platform's algorithm works and how to work with that platform's algorithm better. I can guarantee you that if you're simply setting it up and running your campaigns the way you did 2, 3, 4 years ago, your campaigns are underperforming. Remember the real life example Emily walked you through where the Fortune 500 company underperformed on a budget of $80,000 in 1 month by 35,000 clicks. Unfortunately, that happens all the time, and in most cases, the businesses don't even know. That's why we are constantly testing how campaigns are set up, who we can target, new ad types, and creative, which leads us to level 6, optimal media performance. If you've been realistic and transparent about your media's KPIs, then you are much more likely to hit and exceed your goals. That then leads us to the top, level 7, moving your clients' bottom line numbers, which is where we always start. You are much more likely to help your client meet their goals if they had shared them with you, and if they have shared them with you and your media campaign has both the appropriate resources and has been set up properly to target and move the right people to action, then everything most likely was aligned and worked the way it should have. That's why we spend considerable amount of time up front getting our clients' goals clear and transparent before we begin media planning. Our planning now always keeps this new framework in mind because the amount of changes that have taken place in these 5 media areas are substantial. They have had a huge impact on the way campaigns are set up, how you target, the ads you can run, how you monitor, optimize, and ultimately on how your campaign performs. That actually concludes our presentation. So Emily and I will be more than happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. I think we got one that came in.
Oh yeah, we got one. Is it considered a duplication of efforts or spend to run the same content in both paid and boosted organic social content?
So I think this answer is not clear cut. There'll be some cases where you will run some of the same ads, and there'll be considerable more ads run in paid than on boosting. So I think it depends on the client, the goals in the campaign on how you're setting it up. But there is nothing wrong with setting up and testing some post in organic in order to determine what might go live in paid social. Anything you want to add, Emily?
No, I think that's great. Did you want to add something else?
I was going to say, it looks like we got another question
Yeah.
on device ID targeting.
Yeah, we got another question. Might be a bit off topic, but I heard a reference to device ID targeting. Can you explain that? How is it different than all the other targeting and retargeting that we hear about?
So device ID targeting involves technology that simply can monitor and capture when someone walks into a store, a retail store, a grocery store, etc., and are carrying their mobile device with them, and it's actually on. They don't have to be engaging with it, but it just needs to be on. Once a person walks in and that device is on, it's captured, and then you can use that list of devices that have walked into that business and target them on almost every platform. Some people use this technology only in programmatic, but you can actually take the device ID targeting list and put them on Facebook, put them on Snapchat. You can even do it with the high impact ads. And when you're using some of the same lists of devices that you're targeting, it becomes so much more powerful on how you're engaging those people across multiple platforms. Because remember, all platforms do not share their data. What happens in Facebook is not shared over in programmatic and is not shared in Google, et cetera. But when you're using the same list from device ID targeting, you're actually increasing your ability to move those people to return and purchase more product.
Yeah, and I will add to that too, that guarantees you a higher frequency since you're working with this set audience from platform to platform. So you're able to really clearly monitor how you're affecting the frequency across the board and getting a stronger frequency for your campaigns.
Exactly. One last thing I would say, once this data is put onto the platform, in many cases, you can do lookalike audiences that increase the quality of the impressions, the high quality impressions we've referred to. So you're much more likely to target like-minded people. And all you have to do is put the parameters of demographic and geographic criteria over the top of that, and you're going to have high quality of impressions.
All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to pass it back to Jeff for some exciting things that are coming soon.
Yes, and actually, we're going to have two more webinars between now and the end of the year. At the end of October, we're going to take a deeper dive into the targeting, and we're going to have a special guest, someone that will actually speak much more thoroughly about device ID targeting and all the other things that you can do with device ID targeting, along with some expanded conversation around targeting that we touched on today. We'll dive a little bit deeper. And then before Thanksgiving, Emily and the creative director at Ampersand, Brian Thompson, are going to expand on organic social and how that can become an even more important and critical component to your media plan. So with that, we're going to wrap things up. We're just a minute or two before the hour. We appreciate your attendance. Again, if you have any questions, send them to us. And if you need us to follow up and contact you in person, we're more than happy to do so. Emily?
All right. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you joining us, and have a great rest of your day and your week.
Thank you. So who is on?